Hey everyone, hope everything is going great. And we have been discussing the 5 C's of marketing for situational analysis. Today, we have come to look at the fifth and the final C of 5 C's of marketing, which is context. So when we say context, we mean the macro environment of an industry. So let's go deeper into what each of the letters of PESTEL analysis means. So first looking at the environment of a company. So for example, at the most inner point is your company surrounded by the industry in which this company operates, and that industry is surrounded by the macro environment. Now, to analyze the macro environment, to assess how much feasible and how much profitable your product or service is going to be in that market, there is a systematic framework to do that, and that's called PESTEL analysis. If you don't use a framework like PESTEL, it can be a very random list of attributes which you would be analyzing, and there's a risk that whatever factors you are looking into, somebody else might be looking into a different set of attributes. So there can be disagreements, and bringing everyone together on one structure would be complicated. So for any analysis like this, it's always useful and systematic to go with a framework. And PESTEL analysis is actually a great one for analyzing the macro environment of an industry or a company. So let's first understand what are the 5 letters of PESTEL. P means political. So political attributes can be state, local, national, regional, any changes in the political environment. It can also mean the political stability, security, and how much corruption is there in that environment. So all these things will influence how a product or service is going to get reception in the market. So whenever you are doing the situational analysis, it's necessary to understand the political factors which are into play for that product and service. Coming to economic, so what are the economic growth? How are the employment rates? What is the inflation in that economy? Interest rates, exchange rates, economic inequalities. These things will matter a lot because, just for example, if it's a highly inflated market, and if at that point in time you are hoping to launch a product or service, it's very unlikely that you are going to see much acceptance from customers and purchase. So that might not be a good time. So assessing these attributes really guides you on the timeline when you should try to launch a product or service, and several other related factors like exchange rates, right? So if exchange rates are very high for an economy, for example, compared with US dollars, probably you'll lose a lot of money in conversion. So again, that's not a good time. So it's essential to understand the economic factors as well, because ultimately that would impact your bottom line, your profits. Coming to the social attributes, what could be the social attributes? Some could be the demographic trends, the values, what is the culture of that macro environment. These things influence, right? Because if it's not aligning with where the demographic trends are showing up, or what's the culture of that environment or a geography, your product is going to have a hard time getting acceptance or a very good time, high acceptance rate. So it's necessary to find that product market fit. And again, like political, economic, social is also an important attribute to be looked at. Coming to technological, so how much innovation is going on in that product or service? What are the innovations in the industry right now? What are the new technologies which are coming up which could make your product or service more powerful or less powerful? So these things again needs to be assessed for doing a situational analysis to kind of get a perfect understanding of whether it's a good time, it's a good environment to go ahead with the launch of your product or service. Coming to environmental, so it's necessary to understand what is going to be the impact of your business on the natural environment. Is it going to create a lot of pollution, or is it going to create a lot of plastic waste, or is it going to create a lot of energy waste, like creating big data centers? Many of those data centers in close by locations or in one locations could again lead to a lot of energy loss. So you have to be cognizant of the environmental impacts when you're hoping or kind of conceptualizing if you want to launch a product or service in a market. Finally, coming to the last letter of PESTEL, which is L, implying legal. You need to understand the legal infrastructure. So the market or the country or the geography in which you are going to operate, what is the legal infrastructure? How many courts? What is the uh, what is the court procedure looking like? Because you would need legal assistance, you would need a legal point of contact, you would need a place where you could address your legal matters if the case arises. So it's essential that you understand that everything is looking all right and is aligning with your power to address and with the market, with the product, with the service you are trying to target. So you need to assess that. Again, there could be statutory provisions in that legal market. There could be international law and treaties, right? So, for example, I was reading a case on on an airline, and they were trying to expand internationally, but again, one of the European airports, they don't allow US flights to go beyond a certain region. So there is an international hub or point, you can say. Beyond that, the flights cannot go. You have to depend on strategic alliances with the domestic airlines to cut across those regions. So if somebody is traveling from US and they want to go to a specific region in Europe, they will only be able to travel through that airline to a specific point in Europe, and from that they will have to get connected via strategic alliances of the parent airline to get to their final destination. So these things should always be kept in mind. You cannot go ahead and launch a product or service without keeping these factors in mind, because if you do that, so much investment, what you would end up doing at the start of your business is at great risk, right? So you should do a deep analysis of the macro environment before you go ahead and launch a product or service. So this is the PESTEL analysis. It's a very powerful framework for analyzing the context of the industry you are hoping to launch a product or service. And I wanted to cover this today. So I think that's it. I would love to learn if you have applied this framework and have some learnings or experiences or any limitations of the PESTEL analysis if you have noticed. So if you have any of such context or content, please feel free to share. But for now, thank you. Bye-bye, and hope you'll have a great weekend.